UFC Paris is just a couple of days away, and we're for the preview show to take a look at this card from top to bottom, and what a great card it is. Some Irish interest, of course, with Caolan Lougran, Rhys McKee, Cyril Gane, Sergai Spivac are the headliners in the heavyweight division. Manon Fiorot versus Rose Namajunas in the co-main event. Rose's first stint at 125. Very excited for that fight too. I'm here. I've moved house. My internet connection is shit. I have to get it set up. Apologies for anybody that's watching and the video goes all blurry and stuff. It's a work in progress. I'm going to have it out with my internet provider who promised me that this wasn't going to happen yesterday. But that's a problem that I'm going to face. That's the fight I'm going to be fighting after this with my internet provider, Harry. Before we talk some fights, we've got to talk some UFC fights before I go ahead and fight with the customer service team at my internet provider. But that's a fight that we'll probably discuss, or we'll know who's won or lost that one the next time we come on to record, because I'll either have a blurry video or I won't have a blurry video. But Harry, it's good to be with you. We're a day late, but we're getting it done. A lot of moving and shaking for me this week, but we're here. 11 fight card, a really good card here overall as well. And I'm very, very excited for a lot of the fights on this, and I'm sure that you are as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, we have been proponents of shorter fight cards for a long time, and I think 12 fights is probably the sweet spot. Right now, obviously we've had a fight fall out, fine, no problem. We're down to 11, no problem. These things do happen in MMA fight cards, but up and down the fight card, there are some really, really interesting storylines, not just from an Irish perspective, but across the board. The first thing I think that jumps out to me on this fight card, and the storyline that jumps out to me, or the question that jumps out to me, is Seanie and I put a Speaker's Corner out this week, and it was on the idea that MMA is leaning more towards the idea of being entertaining rather than purely going out and dominating in terms of a skill set, right? Think about Georges St. Pierre. You think about Kamaru Usman, right? Georges St. Pierre was kind of the last guy that wanted to just go out and dominate. Maybe Demetrius Miles Johnson's in there as well, but just wanted to go out and just wanted to dominate. Didn't necessarily want to talk. Didn't necessarily want to build a character. Didn't necessarily want to represent anything other than the skills that they possessed. I think, you know, people may call Khabib Nurmagomedov in there, but he was absolutely trying to represent something. It was the area of Dagestan, right? Rather than just the skills, rather than just picking up wins, he wanted to do so in a specific fashion for a specific set of people. I think this main event is a massive skills question for Cyril Gane, right? This is the UFC asking Cyril, have you fixed the problems that we saw in the John Jones performance? Because if the answer is no, then everyone knows what's going to happen, right? If the answer is yes, well, then we have an exceedingly interesting fight on our hands, because we've got an evolved level for Cyril Gane. Now, we know that Cyril is somebody in the French region and in the European region that carries massive star power, no more than Morgan Charriere, who we'll talk about shortly. But I think that the storyline for this fight card, at least for me, is that entertainment is important, but skills still matter.
Absolutely. And we're going to get a mixture of both entertainment and skills in the main event and throughout the card as well. Let's talk about Cyril Gane and Spivac. Big fight here for Cyril. I feel, you know, this is the perfect opponent for him in regards to, it's a will fight, but and not too stern of a test. Obviously, he was completely found out against John Jones, came back and had a good win against Tuivasa. But the problem with that Tuivasa fight is that he fought a guy that was going to be willing to stand and bang with him and didn't want to take him down. He's not going to have that luxury this time around with Sergai Spivac, who's ever so closely moving up to the top of the division. And the win for him here puts him up into top 5 and right into title contention as well. How do you feel about Cyril and not changing anything a whole lot here, Harry? Like, I mean, this is going to be the fight that this is kind of like a one step down from Curtis Blades type fight, where, you know, although Curtis is a heavy wrestler, we've seen him strike, but I don't think that Sergai Spivac is going to want to play around too much on the feet, and he'd be absolutely foolish if he did play around too much on the feet with a guy like Cyril Gane.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the blueprint is written for both guys, right? Like, Cyril obviously is fantastic on the feet, moves excellently well for a heavyweight in the striking realms. And we know that Sergai Spivac has a very diverse takedown game, likes to take people down in open cage, against the cage, in clinch situations. And we also know that he has a patented head and arm choke. He is more of a submission threat than Curtis Blaydes is. I would say that he would favor submissions over ground and pound. And obviously we know that Curtis Blaydes is a ground and pound expert, right? When he gets on top of you into positions that he's happy with, he is brutal from those positions when it comes to landing damage. Sergai Spivac is more along the lines of he will find a dominant position and he'll soften you up in order to find submissions. That's fine. We know that Cyril Gane is susceptible to submissions and damage on the ground. John Jones landed both. And so I think here, to answer your question of has Cyril changed anything, or it doesn't look like he's changed anything, social media is one of those things where we don't know what fighters are doing really, right? We only know what they portray. And I agree with you 100% that this is an offering for Cyril, where it's not a here's Curtis Blaydes. It's not a here's a Tom Aspinall, right? It's a here's a guy that if you haven't plugged the holes, if you haven't gone and changed things in your camp, if you haven't opted to, you know, after the last fight, what you were saying with John Jones, he doesn't train out of camp, and maybe that was miscommunication, maybe it wasn't. If you haven't gone out and changed some of the patterns of behavior that you had before, you're going to get found out here again. You know, we're gonna prove to you yet again that skills are important. And as you say, for Sergai Spivac, not messing around on the feet, I don't even think it's a question of messing around on the feet, right? Like this is MMA. You just go out and you win how you win. We talked about Aaron Blanchfield last week on the Balance Breakdown.
Yeah, but you go in and you win and win, but then you have Sean Strickland who wants to stand with like fighters can get drawn out of their game plan at times, you know. And I think you look at Sergai Spivac's last fight against Derek Lewis, and he didn't do that. He got down to business straight away. So that would give me a great deal of confidence that he's not the type of fighter that would get drawn into maybe a striking battle here, or, you know, not going to get deterred from his game plan, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Sean Strickland, it was nothing to do with game plan and all to do with Sean Strickland just committing sabotage to himself, right?
Being a dummy, just being a dummy. That's really
right.
That's
you know, just stuff happened and whatever. Let's not go into Sean Strickland. But we talked about Aaron Blanchfield on the converse, somebody that really struggled in the first round of her fight against Talia Santos and just found a way to win, right? I don't think Sergai Spivac is in an element of his career or in a position of his career where he's going to be making those levels of immature mistakes. Now, I don't mean that negatively to Aaron Blanchfield. She's 24 years of age and very, very new in her career, whereas Sergai Spivac is not that, right? I think Sergai Spivac knows exactly what he needs to do against Cyril Gane. It's to change levels, it's to push him against the fence, it's to take him down, it's to dominate him there. For Cyril, as we have said, it's exactly the opposite. If Cyril is able to come out and give us that Francis Ngannou moment against Stipe where he stuffs the single leg and I, for one, start fucking screaming and my heart starts pumping and I'm like, holy fuck, he's learned how to wrestle a little bit, we've got an interesting fight on our hands. Because if Spivac can't get Cyril down, I think Cyril is going to pick him apart from the outside and do exactly what he is best at. If he can get him down, the question is, one, has he improved his get-up game? And if he hasn't, I mean, it's long, as the kids would say. It's really long.
It's longer. It could be really short either. Spivac has his way. He's going to go and attack for submissions. And I think for me, it's like pretty simple to break down. It's exactly as you described it there with Cyril. You know, he keeps the fight up. He picks apart Spivac at range. How do you best kind of tackle a guy that wants to take you down all the time, Harry, when you're in there? If you were giving some advice to Cyril in there, what should he looking to do in this fight to keep the distance, to keep Sergai Spivac off of him, and to stop this fight from being taken down?
So I think one of the things that is going to be, so when you fight traditional wrestlers, ones like Curtis Blades, who are going to change levels and just shoot a double, the answer is footwork. It's stance changes, right? It's making sure that you're baiting the range change to make them feel like there is space, and then you move your feet either to your left, to your right, or you switch stances, because the takedown opportunity is very different depending on what stance that you're in, because the weapons that are going to be thrown at you are different. The way in which you can enter with your penetration step is different, where you put your head is different, etc., etc., etc. So if you're looking at that range, which obviously Sergai Spivac can do that, the first answer is footwork and its stance changes. I think the second element is feints. You want to make sure you're feinting uppercuts up the middle. You want to make sure you're feinting knees up the middle. You want to make sure that you're offering feints yourself, maybe teeps up the middle, maybe head kicks, whatever it is. You want to make sure you're offering Sergai Spivac a deterrent to just shoot naked shots. You need to make sure that he is aware that there will be something that comes should he decide to shoot. When you're talking about clinch exchanges with Sergai Spivac, which I think is where he's most likely going to try and take the fight down, I think it's either going to happen in one of two realms. I'll slowly just tangent, but I think either Cyril is going to adopt the kicking game that he's used to, and Sergei is going to look to try and catch those kicks and run him down with those kicks, or Cyril is going to be smart and he's going to use the kicks sparingly, and he's going to use the kicks when the angles are in his favor, which makes it hard for Spivac to catch them. And then it's going to be Sergai Spivac trying to close the distance, force Cyril behind the tram lines against the fence wall, and we're going to see inside trips and body lock takedowns and reverse broomsticks and these sorts of things. But if I'm Cyril, I want to make sure that I'm at least 1 foot's width away from that fence wall, meaning if he does close the distance and he closes the distance aggressively, I have time to find wrist control, underhooks. I have time to pull on collar ties and find my way out of those situations, because it would not be, I think it would be silly for us to think there aren't going to be any grappling exchanges. Unless we see something crazy and Cyril knocks him out super quick, which, you know, is obviously a possibility. It's heavyweight MMA. But I think that we will see some grappling exchanges, and Cyril needs to give himself the best opportunity in order to find his defensive mechanics and then circle off those clinch situations. But I suspect that the two main avenues for Spivac are going to be catching kicks and finding shots coming from the outside, trying to close the distance with the clinch. And obviously with the clinch, you don't let him get that close, right? What's the meme? I can't let you get close. I can't get you get close, right? Mr. Chelson and with Silver. But if Cyril is going to adopt the game that he is used to, which is playing on the outside and kicking and moving and being angular, he needs to be very, very, very aware of where his body is in comparison with the cage. You can't let yourself skirt along the cage wall, because then you have no ability to move backwards and give yourself some space to find some underhooks and some wrist control.
Very well broke down there. What are you expecting to see happen here, Harry, in your own opinion? I know you don't really like predicting fights and stuff like that. For me, a quick assumption that I would make on the fight is that, do I think Gane has made improvements in his takedown defense and his grappling overall? Yes, I do. Will it be enough to kind of take out Spivac here? I would like to think at this stage it would. Will it be enough for him to kind of progress and be a champion someday? That question is still wide open and up in the air. But let's concentrate on this fight, Harry. What's your confidence levels in Cyril kind of coming in here and getting the job done on Saturday night?
Not high. And not high because in the fights we have seen previously, I haven't seen anything to give me confidence that he has upped the wrestling, right? Like, any chance he has been given to show his wrestling acumen or his grappling acumen, he's kind of failed, you know? Like the fight against Ngannou, he half falls back on a heel hook, half gets swept. Falling back on an outside heel hook of all things, but a heel hook in MMA at that point in the round is an egregious level of a decision, like just absolutely horrendous stuff altogether. And then we see John Jones, and I mean, that's just an absolute mauling, right? And so we know that Spivac is the level of fighter where you have, if you have a glaring hole, he's going to find it. Now, he couldn't find it against Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall is well-rounded, and that was a big realm of proof there. Derek Lewis, wasn't well-rounded, isn't well-rounded, and was found out. And so I think for Cyril Gane, it's a question. As we said at the top, do I have confidence? No, because I have nothing to base my confidence on. You know, if he can stop this from going to the ground, I think he lights Sergai Spivac up handy. Now, can he? I just don't know. I just don't know. So I can't say that I'm confident with a Cyril Gane pick until he makes the walk. Now, that could be that when we put our picks in, I'm going to pick Sergai Spivac, which I would, because again, I have no basis to say that Cyril has improved the wrestling. But then I could find out 15 seconds into the first round, Sergai shoots, Cyril sprawls, and I'm like, well, okay, fine. Grand. I'm probably picking wrongly here. But I have to pick on the evidence I have at my hand right now, and that's that Cyril's wrestling is not up to par.
We'd all be experts, Harry, if we could look at 1 minute of a fight and then give our predictions then after that, because sometimes you need that little bit. But the unknowns are what makes this main event intriguing. Can Cyril kind of overcome this grappling kryptonite that he has faced in the past? It'd be very interesting to see. Sergai Spivac can just shoot right in and take all of his glory in the main event. Very excited to see that fight, as I am to see Rose Namajunas back in action again at 125, up a weight class from her normal category in flyweight or in strawweight. She moves up to flyweight, and she took on Manon Fiorot. She's getting straight into the mix here at 125, Harry.
I mean, there's nothing else you can do with Rose Namajunas, right? But this is pretty wild coming from me, but I don't get this. I don't get the fight.
Like when you say there is nothing else that you can do, what in terms what you mean with her? Like you can do nothing else with inserting her into 125, or another thing that I would say.
Go on.
Well, another thing I would say is I think the big point here about Rose is she has 2 wins over the current champion at 115, and this decision to move up at this stage of her career was a little bit confusing in my book anyway.
So this is kind of where I'm at, right? With the you can't do anything else with Rose, what I mean is if she's making a trip up to 125, you can't give her the 15th ranked woman. You can't give her a non-ranked. She's Rose Namajunas. Like she's going to be getting here's a top 3 ranked opponent. Right? That's just the way the cookie's always going to crumble in that situation. The thing that confuses me is why are we moving up? But more specifically, why are we fighting still? Right? Like the long layoffs, they're never good for fighters. It doesn't feel as though Rose is as invested or as committed to fighting as you would expect a professional fighter to be, right? You talk to professional fighters all the way from, we're going to speak about Caolan Lougran making his UFC debut, and then we speak about Sean O'Malley that just won a title, and they live and they breathe and they die for this sport, right? Everything that they do day to day is centered around them being a fighter or a martial artist or whatever they want to determine. It does not feel in the last little while as though Rose Namajunas has embodied that. Does that mean that this is a breath of fresh air and Rose Namajunas is coming in without maybe some of the demons that she's carried into other fights? I don't know that that's true. I don't understand this entire situation. I don't get the move up. Like you said, she's got 2 wins over the current champion. A win at 115 probably sees her fighting Weili Zhang, or at least very, very close to fighting Weili Zhang. And so why are we moving up? Is it because the weight cut's really tough? Fine. If it is, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But I don't see that the frame of Rose Namajunas would make it so the weight cuts are like hellish. Why are we fighting at all? I don't know. I just don't. There's just a lot of unanswered questions in the motivations for this fight specifically, because if she wins, she's not getting an immediate title shot you'd expect. I'd expect it's probably Erin Blanchfield that gets the next one. Do we see Erin Blanchfield versus Rose Namajunas for a number 1 contendership fight? That would kind of make me feel as though the Talia Santos Blanchfield fight was a little bit undervalued, right? And I'm just a bit confused. I'm just a bit confused.
Rose Namajunas wins here on Saturday, and I agree. It just throws a complete spanner into the works at 125. And Erin Blanchfield is probably going to be the person who loses out. Like you said, I think a lot of the future of the 125-pound division is going to rest on what the result is in Grasso and Shevchenko when they fight. If Shevchenko wins, we're probably looking at a trilogy, which would probably open up, if there was a trilogy to happen, for the winner of this fight probably to take on Erin Blanchfield, who, in my opinion, is the perennial #1 contender at 125 right now. I believe that she deserves the next shot. She may not get it though, Harry. She may not get it. With this fight, it's a very good stylistic matchup for Rose Namajunas, who seems to kind of fight kind of better when she can kind of toot her own horn at her stand-up game, when she's not mixing up her attacks on the ground. We've seen her getting tired in kind of high-pace, kind of high-action fights, and Manon Fiorot doesn't really fight at too high of a pace. She's a more of a methodical heavy hitter in the 125-pound division, and I think, technically Rose is probably better. She's probably going to come in with the speed advantage in this fight as well. So it's a good stylistic matchup for Rose Namajunas. So there's a very strong outcome here that, we could be talking about Rose Namajunas next week as being a really top contender in 125 after one fight.
Maybe. Right? I just
maybe her head is not in it anymore. I think the big story and the big question and, the big kind of factor coming into this fight is something that you mentioned when you start breaking it down, is where is Rose Namajunas at in this game anymore? Does she want to fight? Does she not? Because you can't be half in and you can't be half out. And it's this move that fighters make. It's like you need either a move up in weight or a move down in weight. It's going to kind of refresh you. I wouldn't the move up. It's not like Rose was really struggling to make weight at 115 either. She was kind of perfect for that weight. I know you don't like weight cutting. You're probably happy to see her up in weight, but she does. I've seen a picture of her at 125 and she just kind of looks like a little, not saying that she is out of shape, but she looks a little out of shape, that she could use that extra 10 pounds that she could cut to give herself, that kind of trimmed, chiseled look, perhaps. Have you kind of seen pictures of her at 125 and how she looks, or how do you think that might suit her?
I just don't know, right?
Yeah.
At 115, this is what I mean by saying she doesn't necessarily have the frame for filling out at 125. She's quite a slender woman. I don't see, as always, if she's made a decision that she doesn't want to weight cut and she doesn't want to go through that whole trauma, fine. I don't know how difficult weight cutting is, full stop, for these professional athletes. I also don't know the complexities that being a female adds to weight cutting. And so if going to 115 is just becoming too much for her as she's getting on in her general age, then that's one thing, right? That is one thing.
Just welcome Sean back to into the team here, popped in just to kind of cover this. Harry, you were right in the middle of explaining where we're at with Rose Namajunas at 125.
Welcome, Mr. Sheehan. Hello, how's it going? Yeah, exactly. The thing we were just talking about with Rose is she doesn't have the biggest frame for 125. And look, if she wants to come in and she's decided she doesn't want to weight cut anymore and she doesn't want to go through those situations, I just was mentioning that I don't really know. None of us really know how difficult cutting weight is for the male professional fighters, let alone the complexities that come in when you're a female trying to cut weight in these divisions. But I don't know. You mentioned it and it was perfect. Does Rose Namajunas want to fight anymore? The answer is I don't know. She's taken a fight, and so that seems to me as though she does. But is she taking a fight because that's the way she earns money? That's the way she's always made money? Is that because that's part of her identity? Is it because she truly thinks 125 is a division she can make a bigger splash in? There's just so many questions that haven't really been answered. As we know, Rose isn't a huge media person either. And so I don't know. From a storytelling perspective, from a fight perspective, I don't really get it. From a styles matchup, I think you're entirely right. Rose is going to be faster. She'll be slicker on the feet. She moves better. And with Manon Fiorot's style, I don't think Rose is going to have too many problems on the feet avoiding big shots. We all remember Jessica Andrade round 1, where she just, at the second fight, where she just danced around her, looked absolutely amazing. And then the first half of the second round where she did the same, and then the cardio fell off a cliff. I suspect Rose can do that here and win a decision doing that. I think Rose is probably better on the ground as well. We know she has a jiu-jitsu background. We know she has some submissions. She was using some really interesting jiu-jitsu stuff to off-balance Weili Zhang when she was getting taken down there. And so I think pound for pound, skill for skill, she is a far better fighter than Manon Fiorot is. But I just don't know what to think coming in here. Like, Shawnee, what do you think?
I was talking about it yesterday on the betting show and trying to break down who I think will win. In the end, my bet for the fight was it to go to a decision. I was like, I couldn't really pick a winner. And then I kind of, my thinking here is, right, so who's going to win the fight? What are the two keys? I think there is a clear key for both of them. I think for Fiorot, it's her ability to use her size and her strength advantage to beat Rose. And I think for Rose, it's her ability to use her speed. So, like, and I assume you've already talked about the Gane fight before I popped in, and I think like a key to that as well is his ability to obviously utilize his speed on the outside and kind of stay away and maybe pick off Spivac at times without getting taken down and stuff. I think it's the same for Rose. Now, not necessarily with as big of a threat as a takedown or anything like that, but I think if she can pick her off, land that lovely left hook inside, kick the leg, kind of switch stance, bamboozle her a little bit, and allow Fiorot to throw her shots but not land them, frustrate her, I think it's an issue. Now, the other side of it then is if Fiorot, I think, can start to land that jab and has like won the kind of the lint battle, and if she can push her against the cage and tire her out a little bit and maybe drag her to the ground or just, be the physically bigger person. Like sometimes we see, a fight will go into the clinch and next thing someone like pulls the head of their opponent down and knees them in the head just because they're too physically strong. Now, having said that, how much physically stronger is she then? I suppose we'll see on that. But she went in there against Chukagan, who's big enough girl, and she was able to do it to her. I think she'll probably be able to do it to Namajunas if it goes in that direction. If it doesn't, I really those points are almost intermingling, right? If Namajunas can use her speed to get away from her, then the strength won't matter. If Fiorot can use her strength to keep her in tow, then the speed won't matter almost if she can use it. So those to me are the two keys. And honestly, I'm not really sure which one will work. I think yesterday I leaned to Namajunas, and I think I probably still lean into Namajunas. But
if Manon Fiorot can kind of go out there and kind of maybe take away some of that confidence from Rose, I think obviously confidence and the mental game is something that Rose has struggled with for many a year, and it's like you need to kind of take away some of that from her in fights, and we've seen that happen in fights as well where she kind of fades away. And if you can become the hammer and she becomes the nail, I'm not sure if she wants to. Like, that's when we're going to find out if she does want to fight or if she doesn't want to fight, because you're going to have to be comfortable in those kind of positions, and you're going to have to kind of fight to get into those better positions. And if you don't want to do that anymore, you're just simply not going to do it. And I think this is a kind of a one we won't know what Rose we're going to get until we see really in there on Saturday night.
I agree. I'm really like, and there's a bit of bias in me here because Rose's style has been a style that I have really, really, really appreciated over her career, specifically in sort of the Joanna Jędrzejczyk period where she was absolutely unbelievable, And I just have a bad feeling about this. I have a bad feeling about the inception of the fight. I have a bad feeling about the mindset she's coming into. I have a bad feeling about the whole thing. And I could be dead wrong, and it might just me being that bit biased where long layoff before that, hasn't looked fantastic in the last couple of fights, had a stinker against Esparza. Like, I just don't know where we are with Rose Namajunas right now. And that's worrying to me.
Well, if we don't know now, we will know after Saturday, and we will break it all down at the weekend. It'll be interesting to see. Any final thoughts, Sean, before we move on?
Yeah, I agree with what you said there, Ian. I suppose we'll know. It's a big moving fight, though, for that division, because we saw, obviously, at the weekend with Aaron Blanchfield and all of that. It's,
Yeah, we mentioned that now. It could be a thing where, there's two kind of things that will kind of set up this division. And the first one, I think, is this fight. Who wins this fight? Aaron Blanchfield's position, but also the result of Alexa Grasso and Shevchenko when they fight. Because if Shevchenko gets the win, we could be looking at a trilogy. So it may be Aaron Blanchfield fighting the winner of this fight down the line a little bit, maybe possibly on the same card, but there's a lot of moving parts at 125.
And the weird thing about it is, right, I'm looking at the rankings here. Aaron Blanchfield just went over Manon Fiorot. But if Fiorot beats Namajunas with her name, she'll probably go over Blanchfield. So if Shevchenko does win, you're probably talking about Shevchenko versus, if Grasso wins, you're talking about Grasso versus her. If Shevchenko wins, as you said, it's probably a trilogy. So this is mad, like 3 weeks in a row. It's massive for this division. It's kind of fun.
Shawnee, what do you think, before we move on, Ian, if you don't mind? Shawnee, what do you think about a Namajunas versus Blanchfield fight? How do you think that goes?
It's an interesting one. Someone asked me about Blanchfield in the Q&A the other day, and they were like, her performance was not that good or whatever. But like, I'm looking here, number 4, Talia Santos. I believe she was number 3 beforehand. Like, you're fighting the very best people in the world right there.
Yeah.
And like, there's like one person in the world better than her, 2 people in the world better than her. So from that point of view, I think she's still very good. She's still learning and all. The thing about that is, right, I don't think she has much of a size advantage over Rose. I don't think she's the biggest in the world. I don't think she's much of a speed advantage. She probably hits a little bit harder, but she's not exactly, Junior Dos Santos or anything going in there. Oh, geez, I think it'd be a fascinating fight. I really do.
With Blanchfield, Shawnee, we were kind of saying on the breakdown last week is like, we labeled it a very good performance because the other fighters would have went out there after losing round 1, after taking a lot of heavy shots from Santos, and they wouldn't have been able to find a way. But what Blanchfield did is she found a way to make it happen. And I think being able to do that against elite level competition at her age shows great promise in what 100%. She can become as a fighter, and that will give her great confidence going into her next fight as well.
And like, people, this is a bit harsh. Like, people need to realize she's not fighting Molly McCann anymore here. Like, she's fighting top fighters now. When you go in there, you're not going to destroy him in the way she just destroyed Molly McCann. But that is a key. I always said about Floyd Mayweather, what made him great was his ability to adjust mid-fight. And it's the same for many fighters. Yeah. And that's a sign of greatness. And Blanchfield showed that.
Floyd Mayweather, my greatest boxer of all time, in my opinion. I think he's fantastic. But anyway, we shall move on to the next one. That's Benoit Saint-Denis versus Thiago Moisés in the lightweight division. This is a low-key fucking belter of a fight, lads. Give this all to me. Benoit Saint-Denis, a bit of a topsy-turvy start to his UFC career, found his way, a good win in his last out. And Thiago Moisés, topsy-turvy is a kind of a good way to describe his UFC career so far. A couple of wins, couple of losses. But Harry, this one is a low-key banger, as I said at the start.
Is it even low-key? Like, I feel like this is the best. Like, this is fight of the night, right? Like, almost.
There's no one been talking about this fight, really. I haven't heard. That's why I would say. Like, obviously, we show the Irish interest and stuff like that, but this is a fucking cracker. Sorry for interrupting you.
Not at all. It's a great fight. Like, I think Moisés is better than his UFC record lets on, skills-wise. I think Benoit Saint-Denis is just, he's maybe the toughest cunt in the UFC. Like, he might well be the toughest bastard in the UFC. Like, when you take a beating like he took against, 1 second while I pull his record up, I can't believe I've forgotten.
Alessio Zaleski, without looking at it.
Fucking hell. When you take a beating like that and you don't go away, unbelievable level of toughness. Unbelievable. Now he's turned it round. He destroys Stolze, he beats Miranda, and then Ishmael Bonfim is a fantastic win. And so we come in now, and he's got a really good fighter on his hands. A really good fighter in Thiago Moisés, who you lose to Islam Makhachev. These things happen in MMA. And you lose to Joel Alvarez, who, again, these things happen in MMA. Rebounds against Christos Giagos. Rebounds against that fella Costa. this fight, both of them have been talking about this fight being the route to the top 15. I agree with both of them. I think this fight absolutely is the route to the top 15. The interesting parts of this for me, I think, are Benoit Saint-Denis hits harder. I think Thiago Moisés is probably a little bit cleaner on the ground, but I think Benoit Saint-Denis has a large physical advantage when it hits the ground, and he's absolutely no slouch of a grappler himself. And so I'm really interested in whether either one of them chooses to try to take this to the ground, or whether we're going to see one of those fights where both gentlemen are competent on the ground, probably more competent on the ground than they are on the feet, and they try to stick to the feet exchanges. I would like to see some ground exchanges, but that's just me.
Seanie, oh my God. What button
We're
did
back.
I press there? Excuse me. Sorry. I pressed when I went to press on pause, I hit another one. Seanie, what's your thoughts on this one? I think it's an interesting stylistic matchup. It could be an absolute war. It all depends for me what Moisés shows up here. I mean, we've seen Moisés at his best and he causes a lot of people problems, but we've always seen him kind of falter as well. And it'll be up to Benoit Saint-Denis. He'll have the backing of the crowd. He'll have the buzz behind him. It's up to him to kind of take this fight by the scruff of the neck and kind of make it his own, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love fighters like Saint-Denis somewhat. Obviously, he lost to Zaleski, but Moisés, if you look at his losses, right? You mentioned Joel Alvarez, Makachev, and he lost to Ismagulov, Dariush, right? I love lads like that who keep taking those hard fights, lose them a lot of the time, but also like keep coming back for it, right? And if a guy, we haven't seen many people like that actually succeed. Usually they just keep losing to the best guys, right? Bisping is obviously an example of one, and Charles Oliveira somewhat is an example of one who came and became a champion and all. Now, I'm not saying that Thiago Moisés could do that, but at 28 years of age, I think now it's kind of shit or bust for him, right? And the problem is if you lose to Saint-Denis, it's a little bit like losing to Joel Alvarez, an obviously talented guy, but it's not Makachev. It's not Ismagulov even. It's not Dariush. No, Ismagulov was a few years ago, but you get what I mean. It's like it looks a little bit worse than it actually is, and that's not great when you're kind of going forward. Because like even speaking to Rhys the other day, he was talking about the Jimmy Wallhead fight. Look, if I lose that fight, I have to win 3 more to get back into even this conversation, and that's the big issue here for Moisés. If he loses this one, there's a lot of work to do to get him back in. A little bit less, I think, for Saint-Denis, because what is he, 11-1? He's only lost the one fight if it's 11-2, but still he'll have to work his way back too. But I just think it's especially at lightweight, it's one of those weight classes where you're just it's such a long road. It's like you have to go on a 10-fight win streak nearly to get into contention, and I think that's why this fight is huge for me.
It's kind of the same problem, lads, that you're talking about there, Sean. The kind of bantamweight, featherweight, and lightweight right now is so rich in talent that wins mean so much more and losses are so much more detrimental to fighters here. So it'll be very interesting to see who gets the upper hand on Saturday night. I'm looking forward to that one, as I am looking forward to seeing Oezdemir versus Bogdan Guskov. We probably won't spend too much time on this, guys. I'd like to kind of stroll down and spend a little bit of time, obviously, on Rhys McKee and Caolan Lougran. But Harry, your quick thoughts maybe on Oezdemir and Guskov and what you expect to see in this fight in the 205-pound division.
Fireworks is the answer. Oezdemir doesn't know how to fight anything other than in 5th gear. And Bogdan coming in, UFC debut, like there's no better way to make a UFC debut than picking a straw like Volkan Oezdemir, because he's there to be hit. He's going to try and take your head off. And so let's see it. No problem. I mean, I won't be rude, but like a Volkan Oezdemir fight doesn't really interest me in terms of its divisional relationship now, but give me Bogdan Guskov and let's see what he can do, right? A fresh entrance into 205, a division that's always screaming for some new talent. And we might have it here. So show me what you've got, sort of thing.
14 wins for Guskov, 12 by way of knockout. We know Oezdemir likes to go in and stand and bang as well. So the likelihood of a knockout in this one is quite high, and I'm very excited to see. Look, I won't go to you, Seanie, but I will go to you straight away for the next fight that we're going to speak about, and that is William Gomis versus Yanis Ghemmouri. Big news coming into this fight. Yanis Ghemmouri was supposed to be fighting Caolan Lougran at 135, calls up the UFC on Monday to say he's not going to make weight. Suddenly gets pulled from Caolan Lougran's fight, gets rewarded a main card fight up a division for not being able to make weight at his contracted weight. This whole situation, and we'll talk about Caolan's situation on the other hand a little bit, but this is absolutely insane, Seanie, isn't it?
Yes, but I don't know what I blame kind of the UFC or the matchmakers or anything for that necessarily. Now, Yanis, blame him, but look, the French Federation is notoriously tough to deal with, and that's good. It should do things like that, but also it's the sort of place that will say like, oh, William Gomis is an experienced former champion. And like, let's say someone like, I don't know, let's say Ange Loosa or something, they can't be on a main card, like something like that. They do, they're weird the way they do things. It took a while to get these matches allowed and all like that. So I usually would not give the UFC the benefit of the doubt, but in this occasion, I absolutely will. Now, on that fight itself, look, I watched a good bit of Yanis, obviously, because he was supposed to fight Caolan Lougran, and I watched a lot of William Gomis, obviously, in the UFC and in Cage Warriors before that. It's an interesting enough fight. Like Yanis for 12-1. I spoke on, I think it was on the SevereMMA podcast, and said, Jesus, it's about as easy a 12-1 matchup you get if you're Caolan Lougran, because they have similar enough styles, I think. And Caolan is just like far superior. But for Gomis, it's Gomis and Caolan Lougran have the most far apart styles you could possibly find in fight, which is it's a very hard thing for Yanis. Like Gomis is like this outside striker who like touches you and runs. Caolan Lougran stands there in the middle of the cage and tries to fucking punch your head off and take you down. So tough for Yanis. Yanis a little bit like that as well. Stand in the middle of the cage, tries to hit you, tries to be technical kind of in the middle of it, not much motion. I just think like he's going to have to adjust that, because that's not going to work against Gomis, because this is going to be 30-27 Gomis if they both fight the way they normally fight. And on short notice, you kind of almost have to do that. You kind of almost have to revert the type. So yeah, that's what I think. I don't think this is going to be a classic, if I'm being honest. I think 30-27 Gomis is probably what we're going to see here.
Yeah, we've seen Gomis fight on his bike lots of times before. Obviously, we're familiar with him too, Harry, from seeing him fight briefly in Cage Warriors and his couple of UFC fights after that as well. A very tricky guy to kind of get a read on and to kind of get a hold of on the feet. Fights very well on the front foot, also fights very well on the back foot as well. And, I've seen him perform even better sometimes on the back foot than I have on the front foot here. And I'd expect he's going to be looking to try and just keep his distance and kind of fight at range and kind of just keep Ghemmouri at the end of his jab here. What's your kind of read on how this fight is going to go down?
Yeah, I think I agree entirely with Seanie, right? And that's that Gomis knows exactly how he fights. And when you get a guy that fights like that and chooses to fight like that, you have to be so much better than him, both at his style, but just at being able to cut the cage off. Right? That, or you need to be able to land 4 shots around that are big, big, big shots. That'll win you the fight. Fine, no problem. Because Gomis isn't a big hitter. He's a volume guy. He's an attrition guy. He's a guy that wants to land, point, get out, exactly as Seanie said. So if I'm Ghemmouri, I'm probably going to have to try and draw him into a war, and that's exceedingly difficult to do. Or I'm going to have to pick my moments exceedingly carefully. And when I get him and I find an angle, I have to have the confidence and the ability to take those chances. Because if not, Seanie nailed it. It's 30-27 Gomis. He's going to skirt the cage, skirt the cage. He's going to land 50 shots around. And that's it. He'll take all the points with him.
100%. The last Pirate sails into the UFC. He will make his featherweight debut against Italy's Manolo Zecchini. Harry, I'm excited to see Morgan Charriere there. Obviously brings a big crowd, brings an exciting style, and it's good that he's getting the shine in the UFC. Obviously, look, we could go on and look, we could talk about Paul Hughes and that whole situation. We'll probably steer clear from that today just to try to get through the card, but it goes without saying, you know, we've seen Charriere fail against Paul Hughes. We've seen him in there with some of the best in Cage Warriors. Now he gets the chance to kind of come in and stake his claim in the UFC's 145-pound division. Are you excited to see him in there?
Of course. I mean, for somebody like Charriere, the age he is, the place he is in his career, it had to be now for him. You know, you can't be waiting 2 or 3 more years and then, oh, I'll go in at 35 or whatever it is. It's too late. Like, it's absolutely too late. It's too late to make a name. It's too late to make revenue. It's too late to take a run at a title shot if that's your aspiration. So it has to be now. Like, it absolutely has to be now. The UFC understand also what they're doing. He has an absolutely insanely large following for what was a regional level MMA fighter. Bring him in on the inception of the France card. Bring him in where all the fans are going to be there. The pirate flags will be going mental if flags are allowed in the venue. Who fucking knows? Whatever. But this is an opportunity for him to go in against a guy that likes to stand and bang. And that's perfect for Charriere, right? Charriere can do a bit of everything. He obviously prefers to sit down on his shots, keep low in his stance, keep his hands tucked by himself and throw big bombs. And that's where he's good. That's where he wants to be. But he can also grapple a bit, right? Like, he can also find his way around grounded opponents. And I think for the UFC, you give him a guy that's going to put on an entertaining fight and the French fans will love it. And obviously he wants to go out there and get his hand raised, and then let's do the Paul Hughes rematch in the UFC, please.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Look, with Sherry John, it proves that, you know, all is not lost if things don't go your way in Cage Warriors. I think we've seen an example of this with Paddy Pimblett in the past, where he didn't choose to fight for the title to get entry into the UFC, and Charriere went down the same path again. And I think he was right to do that as well, and it's all worked out very well for him in getting in. That's what he wanted to do. Obviously, it would have been nice to go in there as Cage Warriors champion, but this is a good kind of end product, considering what happened in his Cage Warriors career.
Indeed. Look, we all know about Charriere. If people don't know, like, he's this big YouTube star, or a star in a YouTube star's videos, I suppose, in France. And, you know, he's massive. Plus, one massive thing, and, you know, the Paul Hughes situation, look, we all understand it. It's a French card with a French star, but what he has over Paul Hughes is he's active, you know, and he hadn't always been active, but he's been active. He's lost 3 fights and got 3 good wins. And that sometimes just can be a little bit of the difference as well. But on this fight itself, it's a very interesting fight. Watched a bit of Zecchini, and he loves to attack. He loves to go forward, throw his big left hand down the middle. I think, again here, not to repeat myself, but speed is a real key factor here. Like, what Charriere struggled with Vucinic and Hughes was guys who could maybe match him for speed, but were better technical fighters than him. I think he's a speedier fighter than Zecchini, and I think he's probably a little bit technically better as well, because Zecchini is more of like a hitter, to quote Nick Diaz. Not to say Zecchini's bad or anything. I do think Charriere has improved, though, and improved from those 2 fights against, you know, the 2 kings of the featherweight division in Europe, in Vucinic and Hughes, over the last few years. And as Harry said, I think it's a great opportunity and the right time for it. Good decision by the UFC as well to get such a French star in there. And yeah, I do see him winning here. I think look, I think it'll either be a late win for Charriere or a decision win for Charriere. No, if Zecchini hits him, he can absolutely knock him out. He has very, very big power, but I think he'll tire him out. And by the end of the fight, look, if Charriere wins the first 2 rounds, or if he wins the first round nearly, I think you can kind of bet on him handy enough to win it then towards the end, as I said, or win the decision.
Yeah, 100% excited to see the last part in there, representing Cage Warriors, representing himself, French MMA. It'll be a good one. But he won't be the only person that's in there representing Cage Warriors. We got a double dose of Irish action. We're going to start off with Caolan Lougran versus Taylor Lapillus in the 135-pound division. As we said, Denis Ghemmouri out, Taylor Lapillus in, and this guy is a fucking sticky one for Caolan Lougran. There's no way of buttercutting it. This is just, I'm not doubting Caolan at all. I would still think he has the mental fortitude to kind of work through this, but it's a lot to take on here, Harry, for your UFC debut. Last minute change of opponent, different style, and a real big jump up in class to what he has been kind of facing on the regional scene and at Cage Warriors as well. A lot of moving parts here for Caolan Lougran to face on a UFC debut.
The absolute fucking stones on this lad is unbelievable. Like, now, for both men, you know, we say all the time about, oh, you know, short notice replacement for Caolan Lougran, and oh, that sucks, and oh, Ghemmouri and whatever. Taylor Lapillus is in exactly the same boat. Like, he's had a completely different opponent change. He's now fighting somebody different. And I think the thing that's interesting about this specific fight is Caolan Lougran brings an entirely different mental fight as much as he does a skills perspective when the door closes and they're trading bones at each other. You're going in as Taylor Lapillus, who isn't the biggest talker, is just a guy that goes out and fights really well and is very highly skilled. Caolan Lougran's coming in here, and at any moment he can, he's talking poorly on French MMA. He's talking poorly on France itself. He's bigging himself up. He's talking about the Irish fighters. He's talking about anything possible. He's going to try and be the loudest guy in the room. And that's unnerving for a fighter, right? Whether we want to say it is or not, and whether we want to say, oh, all of this talk doesn't matter, it's about what happens in the cage. We all watched Conor McGregor's run. We've all watched Chael Sonnen. That's not specifically true, right? It's not categorically true that you can't get inside a fighter's head before the fight happens. Now, is that going to happen with such short notice with Taylor Lapillus? I don't know. We're going to find out. But man, for both fighters, this is a really difficult change of opponent, a really difficult change of style. But I think for Caolan Lougran, one of the things that he's done exceptionally well is he's made himself heard here. And I go back to the moment that I mentioned at the start, which is the UFC more than ever, and MMA in general more than ever, feels like it's moving towards more of the entertainment side outweighing the skill side. We talked about that on the Speaker's Corner that's out. Feel free to go and have a listen. And Caolan Lougran is absolutely coming in here with the entertainment guns blazing. Now, that's not to say he's deficient in the skills element, but he's really rubbing up to what the UFC wants. Big talker, big statements, big personality. And if he does go in and do the business against Taylor Lapillus, it will be a UFC debut to remember.
Absolutely. We'll get into the nuts and bolts in just a second, maybe. But maybe your overall outlook on this and how it's all played for Caolan and Seanie. I mean, difficult circumstances, as we said. But, I mean, we're off to the fucking races here if Caolan goes in here and does this. And if he goes out here and blows Taylor out of the water, I mean, goodness gracious, it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Yeah, I'd maybe cool the Jetson to blow him out of the water a bit. He's too good of a fighter to talk in that way. And like if he did, Jesus, it'd be unbelievable. But yeah, this is, if you're talking about the difference between Yanis Ghemmouri and Taylor Lapillus, it is night and day. A completely and utterly superior fighter, one that is way more skillful, way more experienced, just a better fighter, just a way better fighter. And as Harry said, the stones on Caolan Lougran to go in and take this fight is absolutely unbelievable. Absolutely. I'm fascinated by this fight, though. I just think it's an absolutely brilliant fight. Like, watching a bit of Lapillus, look, his big deficiency, I suppose, is the wrestling. And we've seen Caolan over the last few fights being able to go forward, take lads down. So, you know, it's simple enough. And it's not that Caolan can strike or isn't a good striker. I would say, I don't know, is Caolan a strike first fighter? Maybe. I'm not too sure. Yeah, but he's a very good wrestler as well, though. I'm just interested.
It's the short notice here, Seanie, ain't it? Yeah. It's like
who can adjust to the short notice is the big part of this. Because like Lapillus has a style that if you go in and take him down, you can beat him that way. How do you beat Caolan? Like, first of all, he's never been beaten, and second of all, he's a very odd, unusual style that, like, not just is he going to strike or is he going to wrestle, but if he does strike, the way he strikes is very odd, and he's almost asking you to come in and attack him from a position where it looks like you should be coming in and attacking him, and then he'll fucking devastate you with big shots if you do, or take you down. So it's a tough fight for Lapillus as well, and the ball's on him to take this at the same time as well. I'm fascinated by this.
I think the thing
Harry,
that makes
your thoughts.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
absolutely. I think the thing that makes this so interesting is the style of Lapillus is actually how you beat Caolan Lougran. The style of Lapillus is you work the body, you work the legs, and you take your time. You just accumulate damage. Now, the question is, can you accumulate damage without taking so much damage that you can't land enough damage yourself, right? Like in the in the Rome fight that got this ticket to the UFC for Caolan Lougran, your man stood there and was like, I'm just going to land more damage. I'm going to work the body. I'm going to work the legs. And Caolan was like, that's fine. Watch this. And just decimates him, you know? The question is, what can Taylor Lapillus bring in terms of his head movement, his defensive awareness? What can he do in terms of the accuracy of his strikes? I think, because you're absolutely right, Caolan Lougran stands there inviting you to try and hit him, inviting you to allow him to land the shot. Is Lapillus accurate enough to find the liver, to find the kidneys, to work the ribs, to beat the legs? Because when Caolan stands, he stands aggressively into his ankles. He really roots his feet into the ground. His whole body, you can feel through the fucking TV, the tension that's running through that man's body when he gets ready to throw a shot. His entire body is primed for power. Can Lapillus find a way to sap the energy from that? So when the shots come, they're just 5%, 6% per round less. So when we get to that third round, which is what I think Lapillus is going to want to try and do, sap the energy in the first, sap the energy in the second, and then start to take over. If I'm the Lapillus corner on whatever 24 hours, 48 hours notice we've had, I'm going to ask him to work the body, work the legs exclusively in the first round. In the second round, start mixing it up, offer head kicks, offer body kicks that with way more intention. And in the third round, we're going to run him over and try and finish him. Caolan Lougran's going to say, that's fun. How about being on your back for 5 minutes and I'm going to smash your head into the ground? It's an unbelievable fight. We're going to really find out the ceiling of Caolan Lougran's potential in this performance.
100%. And for me, it's that second point you made on Caolan. It's let's take this fight down. If you feel you're going to be more dominant in the grappling department, if you feel that that's Lapillus's weakness, just fucking take advantage of it on short notice. You've already proved have the balls by taking this fight. You don't need to go in there and take any unnecessary risks when you're in there. But, you know, having spoken to Caolan, I mean, I've not experienced a feeling talking to somebody, and I've talked to quite a few people as I have after I talked to Caolan Lougran. The belief in himself and his abilities is almost contagious. And I could honestly say, I think I've spoken to anyone who has such a strong mental strength, and kind of how he transcribes it over into how he talks and how he fights is so impressive as well. It's like, yeah, I don't know. You have spoken to him already, Seanie, haven't you? Did you kind of get that same feeling from him as well?
I did, yeah. I did, but also you go into that Hazan fight, and I don't know. I thought he fought like a little bit nervously in that. No, it didn't last long, and he got out of it. But like, he's also 8 fights into his career, 7 fights at that stage, and you need that. And I think that'll stand to him. Like speaking to Rhys the other day, like him fighting Jimmy Wathead will stand to him fighting the next batch of guys he fights. No, like the Hazan one, it is an away fight, you know, in continental Europe with the big crowd. Like, it's going to be a similar thing here. Now, I don't think it'll be the same raucous atmosphere, a little bit, I suppose, but it's kind of the middle of the card. It's Lapillus and all that. He's not as big a star in terms of on the night as Hazan was. So, but look, the point there, if Caolan Lougran can fight with no nerves at all in this fight, he'll be a hard guy to beat. A really, really, really hard guy to beat. But it's a massive test. Like, it's one of those ones where, like, this is a test too quickly. Like, this is too soon. He shouldn't be fighting this guy right now. He should be fighting this guy in 2 or 3 fights time, I think. But that doesn't say he won't win. Harry?
the other part of this, right, is we also have to think about what's Lapilus going to be like? What nerves is he carrying in? Home country, home city, the crowd, everyone is there to see him and the French consort. You've got Caolan Lougran walking around fight week screaming at the fucking top of his voice that he's going to smash any cunt that comes near him. What does Taylor Lapillus think going in? Like, I agree with you. I think the Dylan Hazan fight, he looked nervous and he fought nervously. Now, props to him. You fight nervously and you get through it. Massive stage, Cage Warriors title. You know what a Cage Warriors title means. You've now gotten the ticket to the UFC. If anything, there's no pressure on Caolan Lougran because you're going and you're fighting in your UFC debut in enemy territory against the change of opponent of the level of Taylor Lapillus. To me, Taylor Lapillus is going to be coming in and being like, I need to smash this guy. Like, because if I don't, it doesn't look great for me and my UFC record. So yeah, I think it's a good fight for both guys, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes down for sure.
Yeah, Lapilus will have that benefit of, he had a short stint in the UFC years back, so he would have had a feel for what to expect coming in. It'll be all new for Caolan, but I'm buzzing for this fight, buzzing to see how Caolan can handle it, and it'll be absolutely sensational if he gets it done. Rhys McKee will step back into the octagon when he takes on Ange Loosa in the welterweight division, and it's a huge opportunity for Rhys McKee here, I believe, to right the wrongs of his first stint. He went back out, fought a couple of times, picked up the Cage Warriors title, and the way he talks, the way he's carrying himself, and more importantly, the way he's been fighting in recent fights really kind of shows here, Harry, that he seems a hell of a lot more ready than he was. And how could you be ready to fight a guy like Khamzat Chimaev, I guess, the last time out? But this seems so much more better, so much in tune, and much more of a winnable fight for Rhys McKee on his second stint inside the UFC.
We say all the time that sometimes a single loss or a single losing experience can be the best thing in a fighter's career. Now, obviously, this isn't the first time Rhys McKee has lost a fight, but I think that the UFC stint allowed Rhys McKee to, one, know what the level is, and two, realize that he's actually not that far away from it whatsoever. Khamzat Chimaev, sure, look, these things happen in MMA, whatever. But the Alex Morono fight specifically is the one I think Rhys came away from and said, no, I am that level. I'm absolutely that level. I didn't perform to the best of my ability. The fight came away from me. Alex Morono is a fantastic veteran. We know that. But I think Rhys realized that he could do things in this division. He is UFC worthy. Went out, destroys Burlinson, has a fantastic performance against Jimmy Wallhead, and now we're here. Ange Loosa is a much, much, much kinder stylistic matchup and a much kinder skills matchup for him than any of the opponents he had in the UFC stint the first time. He's a guy that doesn't move very well for a massive human, doesn't move his head off the center line very well, can wrestle a little bit, doesn't have a diverse amount of takedowns, but he hits hard and he can take a shot. And so I think for Rhys McKee, with the jab, with the front teeps, with his own head movement, with his own footwork, this should be a much nicer introduction to the UFC than his previous stint.
We looked at Ange Loosa, Seanie, at UFC 178, I believe it was. He took on AJ Fletcher in his last fight. I saw a guy with very minimal head movement, always fights on the center line, and that's not going to be a great thing for Ange Loosa coming in here against Rhys McKee, who hits very hard, number one. And number two, he kind of fades out of fights too. So I was kind of looking at my assessment early for Rhys McKee is going to be footwork and frustration, and letting Ange Loosa kind of fire off and let loose some of that steam where he can kind of build into this fight. And I've heard him chatting about this fight, and he wants to kind of bring in the same level of performance as he did. Maybe it was when he was talking to yourself over on Sherdog there, that same level of kind of patience and methodical approach that he brought in against Judo Jimmy Wallhead, against that experienced opponent. And I think if he does that against Ange Loosa, I think he's going to kind of get the win here. And I'd be, if he really implements his game plan, there's a finish here for Rhys McKee as well. Yeah,
I would tend to agree. And as I said that to Rhys, and he kind of, I suppose, agreed as well. But you're hardly going to say, I'm not going to knock him out as well. But
yeah.
I think Luce is one of these lads that if you went and watched him for like a minute and just saw him attacking, you'd probably think what you said there, Ian, is like, well, what's he talking about there? But you're dead right, because here's what he does. He does two things. He never stops moving when it doesn't really matter. But when it matters, he just stops. So when they're on the outside, what'd you say, Harry?
Steven Gerrard. There, I said it.
That's it. Kind of.
Jesus Christ.
That's how,
Graham will be on to you now on the group.
But like, he either is punching or feinting at all times, right, when he's attacking. And if, like, just a lot of pointless punching and a lot of pointless feinting. A bit of the Holly Holmes, right? But if he does hit you hard, he can fucking crack. He's a serious shot in him. But the problem, as you alluded to there, Ian, not getting the head off the center line, when he punches or when someone punches him, he just stands there. And there's like, it's not, it's like a millisecond of a stand, but like, it's the type of thing the high level fighters would never do. And if you do that against Rhys, you get hit. If you hit you with the first jab and you stand there and you get hit with either a second jab or a right hand, you could very quickly be going to sleep with the power that Rhys McKee has. That's his big issue. Now, maybe it's something he's looked at. He's only 2 fights into his UFC career. He had a Dana White Contender Series fight. He fought John Howard in the middle of that. So, he's a more experienced guy than a 2-fight UFC career would suggest in terms of the number of big fights he has had. So it's an interesting fight. Look, there are pitfalls here for Rhys. As I said, when someone hits that hard, you can get bamboozled by that amount of movement. If your first few shots don't land, it'll give him a bit of confidence and all that. But here's the key for Rhys McKee, and this is always the key for Rhys McKee.
The key for McKee.
McKee in Paris. The key for McKee in Paris. You need to be calm. If Rhys McKee is calm and assured and throws these shots, he will win. Absolutely. And he's the underdog here. He is the underdog here, which I was a little bit shocked by, to be honest. But when Rhys McKee gets in a flow, when he gets his confidence up, there are not many better fighters in the world. Honest to God, there aren't, because he has it all, right? Now, that's in the strike room. In the wrestling, Rhys is going to have to stop him. He's going to have, because this guy, if Rhys hits him with a few jabs, he's going to wrestle him.
He's
and that's another
He's going to shoot for sure.
100% he's going to shoot. And if Rhys can stop that, he's on the way to winner. But if he can't, we've issues again there. But I think it's a good stylistic matchup, as he said, for Rhys. I do think he will win. I think he should be a sizable favorite, but he's the underdog here, amazingly. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm delighted Rhys is getting another opportunity here.
Absolutely fantastic to see Rhys getting another opportunity here, Harry. And, looking at a guy like Loosa, and you know that he can slow down here. Like Sean, he said, and what I'll kind of reiterate, it's kind of patience here and footwork is going to win Rhys here. If he can kind of keep Loosa away from him. You could look at working the body. You could be looking at that front deep to the body, keep Loosa away from him, number one, but also slowly drains the gas tank here, where it could be a slow roll of a performance where Rhys might turn up the gas. I would expect at around the 7 or 8 minute mark, we get that far on Loosa, and we could see him either drive on and win a comfortable decision or drive on and get a knockout. I think, bar a mental flaw from Rhys McKee, he should get the job done here. I'd be super confident in him. I'm actually in the same boat as Sean, as that I couldn't believe that he was an underdog. They're not valuing any of his wins in Cage Warriors, which I think they should, before coming in here, and how different of a fighter that Rhys McKee, from Rhys McKee's last UFC stint, Harry, to what we have seen in recent fights for McKee, what do you think has been his biggest development?
It's all mental. None of it's technical. He's exactly the same fighter, technically. I mean, exactly the same fighter is not true, right? Like, obviously he will have made improvements, but he is the same style. He wants to fight the same way. He wants to land the same way. He wants to work the cage the same way. The difference, I think, is what I alluded to at the start, which is he now firmly believes that he belongs. He's had a little bit of exposure to how the UFC works in terms of media obligations, in terms of the fight night atmosphere, in terms of the arenas he's going to fight in, etc., etc. And so he can turn up, and has turned up this week, being aware of what his duties are as an athlete and as a fighter. And I think, I will always, always, always promote bodywork and leg kicks to slow down the types of fighters of an Ange Loosa. And equally, when you look at the way Rhys fights, he fights long. He stabs those kicks into people's bodies. He stabs the jab into chins and solar plexuses and ribs and these sorts of things. You have to be doing that against Ange Loosa. And I think more importantly than anything is one, calm, like Seanie said, but two, don't chase the finish. Just let it come. I'll go out and get a win. That's the main thing. Just go out and get a win. I don't need to see Rhys McKee looking to raise the roof with a first round sub 2 minute 30 finish. If it comes, great, but don't chase it. Just go out, be yourself, and get a win. That's the most important thing.
Absolutely, 100%. Quick run through of the final three fights. Nora Conorle takes on Jocelyn Edwards at 135. Farid Basharat takes on Cledson Rodriguez at 135. Zara Farin takes on Jacqueline Cavalcanti at 140 catch weight, which will get us kicked off. Harry, any quick thoughts on those three fights? I know your boy Farid Basharat you're a big fan of, and that should be an interesting fight with Cledson Rodriguez.
That's a speed and intelligence versus power fight right there. If Cledson Rodriguez looks anything...
Oh. Harry, after dying there, I think your sound is gone.
Sound is gone.
Sound is
for
gone.
once, For once, it's not me with internet issues. Poor Harry's after...
I was like, is it me that's gone here now? But yeah.
I was full sure it was me, but look, we'll continue here. Look, with the Basharat brothers, Seanie, all very, very talented guys. And, Farid coming in here 10-0. It's a good and decent test in Cledson Rodriguez, but Rodriguez is still very beatable at the same time. We saw Basharat take out the Mont Blackshear by unanimous decision. I think that result looks a lot better right now than what we kind of broke down at the time. But the Basharat brothers, big kind of talents coming on here in the 135-pound division.
Yeah, we've seen it down through the years when you have our brother at a high level. Look at Fabian and Leon. Look at the Hugheses back in the day. It really does help, to be honest. And both of these lads are, Jesus, they're very, very, very good fighters. I like them both. Very that undefeated thing as well, Ian. It's tough to get past that. Like, it's tough to give a guy his first loss. I'm really looking forward to that. Cledson Rodriguez is a good fighter, as I watched a bit of him. And look, if you look at the Zara Farn fight as well, even look, it's a 140 catch weight, I know, but like, it's do or die. Like, those fights are really do or die when you're at that stage of your career. The same would go for Carnell against Edwards. Like, Edwards is a good fighter at 13-4, and like, I think she's someone that needs to pick up a win here, because like, she's won her last 3. If she can get another one here, like, I think she's missed weight a couple of times as well. You push on and win 4 fights in a row, and you're talking about something different, but make that weight as well again. But overall, Ian, I know you probably talked about this at the start.
I want to get your thoughts on the heavyweight division, because Harry is gone, and I was going to allow you to. So let's talk about it real quickly. You have to come here and defend your boy Cyril Gane, but we kind of discussed maybe to kind of break down, with Spivac, obviously, this is a striker versus grappler, and it's always going to be who's going to control the distance battle here in the main event. It's kind of a fight that we're unsure what's going to happen until you kind of maybe see the start of it or the first couple of minutes of it, and then you kind of get an idea how it's going to go. What are your key factors in this main event?
I think, look, the key factor to this is almost exactly what I said about the Rose Namajunas fight a few minutes ago. Like, if Gane can keep his speed on the outside and keep your man away from him, basically, it's going to be look, it's going to be one of those fights where the control matters, right? So if it's either the control of the guy taking him down and laying on top of him and beating him up there, or the control of the guy being elusive on the outside. And obviously you talked about it a lot more, but that's kind of my thoughts. But overall, just on the actual card itself, I just think it's a very good card. Like sometimes we come on here and, it can be maybe a bit negative about a well-made card with lots of good prospects, with to me a good main event and all that. Like you look at the 293 card coming up and it's shite compared to this, in my opinion. And we're lucky we have Kiefer on it now to actually put a bit of a put a bit of a sign on it for us. But I'm really looking forward to this card, and if you're a fan tuning in to watch this, I think you should be too.
Absolutely. Harry, we lost you when you were talking a little bit about the Farid Basharat. I'll let you just maybe share your thoughts and then just a little bit of an overview on the card before we wrap it up.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the Basharat Clayton Rodriguez fight to me is a battle of speed and intelligence versus power. Clayton Rodriguez decimated Shannon Ross inside, I think it was like 17 seconds or something like that in the first round, and yet dropped about just before to CJ Vieira. Vieira was intelligent, wrestled well, grappled well, and just made it an MMA fight. And I think if Farid is able to go out and do the same thing here and is able to use the jab, use the superior footwork he has, he moves his head well, and he can grapple. If he can put all of those things together, he gets a good win against a good fighter in Clayton Rodriguez. If he doesn't, and Clayton Rodriguez is able to land the power shots, then Basharat's in for a long old night in the office. And overall, I sort of caught the last little bit of what Shawnee was saying there, and I completely agree. This is a fight card that has a lot of European ramifications, has some interesting title ramifications, has some divisional ramifications up at the very, very top of the card. And we've got some bangers, we've got some prospects, we've got some entrants. Like, what more can you want, really, from a fight night card? This is exactly what they are meant to be there for. The UFC, I think, has nailed the placement of all the fights. Main event, great. Co-main event, great. Got some Irish talent on the main card, opening up with French fighters, a proliferation of French fighters on the main card that should be on the main card. This is a perfect fight night card. Now, as I said, it's a shame that we lost the 12th fight. I think 12 fights is a sweet spot for a UFC card. But all in all, I mean, what more can we ask for? Like, absolutely great card on paper. Great card.
Absolutely. Ooh la la is the response that we need for that card. Fantastic. Really looking forward to watching it. I hope you are too. Looking forward to breaking it down. Head over to the big podcast on Sunday for Sean and Graham's thoughts. Or maybe that's out a little bit.
Hopefully, Graham, Saturday night, Graham, if you're listening.
We and Harry will be back, of course, as always, on Tuesday for the breakdowns. At John Sheen Ba on Twitter and social media, at BJJ_Harry Powell, and at O'Neill MMA is where you'll catch all of us online. We'll see you all the next time. Thanks for tuning in. Apologies for the connections and the bad video quality. The gremlins were at us today, and we'll get that right before the next time. But we'll see you then. Take care.